Hi everyone, welcome to week 2 of building our rolling kitchen cart. Hope everyone's doing well. This week I'd like to show you a few things about making lap joints. But maybe first what I'll do is just kind of review what we did last week. So just to remind you, this is the rolling kitchen cart that we're building, and we said we were going to start with these side panels, and we have the outside frames made, and I also cut out the cross members, and we have that right here. See if I can get you up high enough to see that whole thing. You may recall that we used pocket screws to fasten the rails to the uprights on those four corners and there. And then I just cut out the cross members and got the angle here. It's going to be, should be a nice tight fit. And what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to create what's called a half lap joint. Now there's a couple different ways I could have done this. The simplest way would have been just to cut it right there and right there, and I could have just done a butt joint, put those two together, because there's going to be a layer of plywood over top of this anyways. But I thought just for fun we'll make it into a half lap joint. And what a half lap joint is, it actually, you can see I've kind of marked it out. We are going to cut out of this piece, we are going to cut a section out of both of them so that they fit nicely together. So I will get things set up, and then I'll show you the next step. We're going to use this table saw here. It's an old table saw that I've just allocated to cut dados with. If you're not sure what a dado blade is, you can see here, this is basically two saw blades, and then between there's these spacer blades, and you can see there's another one. And you can adjust how many spacer blades you put between these two outer blades to cut whatever width you need. And as you can see, I've already made a couple test cuts in this scrap piece. First one wasn't quite deep enough, so I adjusted the blade height a little bit to get the second one. And what I'll do is I will run them over like this. I'll move it over, turn it over again, while the blade's turning, obviously, on my good piece here, until I get the proper width that I need. Then I'm going to do that to the opposite side, and they should fit together in what's called a half lap joint. I had to use I'm just going to go over here for a sec. I used a sliding T-bevel to figure out what the angle was that I needed. So you can see here, I just adjusted this thing so it's right on the mark, and then I took that and I used that to get the correct angle on my miter gauge here. Turns out it's actually 15 degrees, so that was handy. So I'm going to go ahead and cut those half lap joints, and hopefully they turn out good so I can show you some nice snug fitting joints. So here's the one lap, one half of the half lap joint, I guess. I don't know if you noticed it, but I generally what I do is I cut the one side and then I cut the other side, And I go nice and slow so that we don't get a lot of tear out on this end. Sometimes I'll even put a board behind there to prevent that, but this wood's pretty good. So I do one side, I do the other side, and then I cut out the middle piece. And I'm going to check it now to see if it fits. And if it doesn't quite fit, I might have to trim just a little bit more off of this side. Looks like I might be a little bit short. I'll just trim that off, and then we should have a nice tight fitting half lap joint. And there it is. You can see this joint fits really nice and snug all the way around. And so that's going to make a really strong joint. We'll probably glue that together when we assemble this. And that will make the first side of our rolling kitchen table. So I'm going to go ahead and do the other side, and then we'll move on to the next step. All right, here we go. Here we have the two side pieces of our rolling kitchen cart. You can see everything fits really nice. Put the nice half lap joint down there. And one of the things I want to point out is that what I always do when I'm building something is I always sand off the corners. And that's one thing people often forget to do. I see this in my students all the time. They will sand the flat sides, but you got to remember to sand off those corners, because number one, if you don't sand off the corners, it's going to sliver eventually. The stain will rub off, and it's just really sharp. When you rub your hand along it, this has got a nice smooth rounded feel to it versus something that would be very sharp. Like up here, I still have a kind of a sharp edge. I'm going to have to want to round that off. So just a little tip that will take a project from being okay to being great. So originally I was going to put plywood on this surface, and the reason I wanted something on there is because if you look at the picture, you can see here there's going to be a shelf here, and in this one they've just got plywood on half of it. I'm not sure what's on the other side, but if you're going to have a shelf and leave the end open, you're going to have problems with things falling off. So I wanted to cover that with plywood initially, but didn't really have the plywood that I was looking for, and was a little confused about how I was going to fasten that on there and keep everything square without seeing a little gap on the edge. So then I thought, well, I'll use up some more of this this timber that I have here, this poplar, but I don't have enough of that. So started looking around the shop, and I have some alder over here, which is a different kind of wood, but I think it'll look good. And then what we're going to do is we're going to make it like strips. So we're going to put these strips in behind there, give kind of this vertical look, and that'll do a couple of things. Number one, it solves the problem of what to do with these pocket holes. So I'll cover those pocket holes with the outside strips, and then we're going to fasten them on. It'll keep things from falling off, and actually I think it looks kind of cool to have a couple different kinds of wood. And I think what I'll do actually is I'll just keep in mind as I move forward in this project, maybe I'll use alder in a few other spots, just to give that kind of bi wood or two different kinds of wood effect. You know that one of the golden rules in woodworking is to, if you can't hide things, then you have to try to accentuate them. So that's what we're going to do here. In fact, I might even use alder on the top, I'm not sure. Put a nice clear coat on there or something like that. I think it'll look pretty cool. So this is actually a knotty alder. You can see there's knots on there, which is just in addition to the rustic effect we're looking for here. So I have the slats here all ready to install. I ended up making them an inch or 2 1/4 wide, which is consistent with the width of these side pieces, just to keep that standard 2 1/4 dimension. I spaced it 3/4 of an inch on the end here, and then the remaining gap ended up being 1.5 inches. So we have our 5 slats evenly spaced here. I'm going to actually fasten them. I'm just going to use a countersink bit to screw into there. If the screw heads are visible, that's no big deal because this is all going to be covered up. It's the inside. There's going to be a shelf above here, and then the top part over there is going to be a drawer, so you won't see any of that. I measure out I always measure out exactly where the screws have to be. I don't like to guess anything. I like the screws to all be, you know, evenly spaced. I don't know, just kind of gives kind of a cleaner look and feel to the project when you do it that way. So I'm going to countersink these. Flush with the bottom, I've marked it out. I'll put one screw in. And I'll just kind of keep the head flush with the surface of the wood. And I think actually I'm going to go up to this side and do that one. You probably can't see me right now, but the other thing I did is I marked out these side rails exactly with the dimensions that I calculated, because sometimes if you just put the first one in and then you measure, say, your 1.5 inches from there, the next one in, measure 1.5 inches. If these slats are even a 30-second out, by the time you get to the end, you could be, you know, a 1/4 inch out, and then your last dimension is going to be off. So I always measure things before I put any of them in place. All right, there we have it. The side pieces are completely finished. You can see that I've got the slats on there. You can see, you know, definitely a different color. It's going to give kind of a cool look once it's all finished. I'm kind of leaning towards doing the same color on the top and maybe the drawer front or something like that. But that wraps it up for this week. Next week I'm going to start working on the cross pieces to put the two sides together, and we'll start doing some figuring as far as where we want the drawer. I haven't quite decided yet how many drawers we're going to put in here, but I've got a week to think about that. So till next time, take care.